Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm Dr. Wilmot Allen, founder of VentureLift Africa. VentureLift is a venture studio and an investment and trade advisory firm. We are also the implementing partner to USAID under Prosper Africa for the Africa Trade Investment Program. And you can find out more about our mandate at AGOATradeworks.com. Simply put, we are identifying and mobilizing a network of Africa Growth and Opportunity Act advisors across Africa and across the United States. I want you to stay tuned to learn more about what AGOA is and how it works. We have 3 series with Chop Black, which we're very excited about, which will give you a wealth of information about AGOA, what it means, how it works, and how it can benefit your business. Again, the website for the project is AGOATradeworks.com. Please check it out. You can also send your questions to info@VentureLiftAfrica.com. I'm Dr. Wilmot Allen, and we look forward to working with you and serving your business needs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this interview about the African Growth and Opportunity Act, also known as AGOA, and its impact on trade and investment in Africa. Today, I'm joined by 3 experts who will share their insight and experiences with AGOA. So I'd first like to welcome Ms. Florie Liser, the CEO of Corporate Council on Africa, leading U.S. business association focused on connecting businesses' interests to Africa. Mr. Witney Schneidman, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. And last but not least, Dr. Wilmot Allen, the founder of VentureLift Africa, organization that focuses on diaspora commerce with Africa and also serves as an implementation partner for USAID Africa trade and investment programs. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
To start off, Florie, could you explain what AGOA is and its origin?
Yes, and of course, Witney knows a lot about this. He was there on the Hill when back in the 1990s, when people were really trying hard. Rosa Whitaker, Mike Williams, a lot of folks were working on this. But the genesis of it is really that the U.S. was looking for a way to transition away from as the major way that it engaged with Africa, and to look for a way that would really focus more on trade. And the idea of AGOA, a lot of people don't know this, was that we would give duty-free access to the US market for African products that exceeded what they already had through the generalized system of preferences. And it would therefore give Africans a competitive advantage in shipping those value-added products to the US. So its intent from the very beginning was to give the Africans a leg up in the US market, which is a tough market. We're big, we're complex, and so we wanted to give the Africans a chance to ship their products to the US. And lots of folks can ship pineapples, for example, to the US, but what we were giving the Africans was pineapple juice and canned pineapples. Those items were coming in at higher duties. So when we made that duty free for the Africans, that meant that there was an incentive to source pineapple juice in that particular case from the Africans. AGOA also gave special benefits in the area of textiles and apparel to the US. We had in that time very high duties. In fact, we still have some fairly high duties in the textiles and apparel sector. And what we allowed the Africans to do was 2 things. First, to be able to ship those to the US duty free, but in terms of the rules of origin, we also allowed them to do something called third country fabric. So fabric that was used to assemble an item of clothing in Africa, an AGOA eligible country in Africa, could use that fabric and still be qualified to send that product to the US, that apparel item to the US, provided that they assembled it there, and then the Africans had to have a visa, an apparel visa, so that people could verify that there was no transshipment. So AGOA essentially, as I said, added, I think, about close to 2,000 products, 1,800 to 2,000 products to what they were already getting under GSP. And again, that was the goal, to see if the Africans, with that additional benefit in the US market in terms of access, could now start to add value to their own products and ship them to the US, and thereby creating jobs in Africa. And I'm sure you'll ask me, but we believe that there has been a lot of success under AGOA. It hasn't done all that we wanted. We have to be honest about that. But there are reasons for that, and we can talk about that later. But essentially, we believe that AGOA has been beneficial. It has diversified African exports to the US. It has allowed countries that were shipping almost nothing to the United States to ship more to the US. And again, to give them a bit of a comparative advantage in the US market.
Thank you. And Witney, as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, could you share your engagement with AGOA and its impact on US-Africa trade relations?
As Florie said, discussions on AGOA began in the mid-1990s in the U.S. Capitol, led by Rosa Whitaker, Mike Williams, Rangel, several others. It's a very bipartisan group. And out of those discussions, the idea for the African Growth and Opportunity Act passed. But it wasn't without opposition. There was concern that American workers would be put out of their jobs in the southern part of the United States, where we had textile mills. Others were concerned that African labor would be exploited by U.S. companies, but none of that came to pass. There is a firm belief, not only by those advocating AGOA, but by the African ministers and certainly the African ambassadorial corps. They came together, they wrote a letter to the leadership of the U.S. Congress saying, we need this legislation, we want this legislation. So when it passed, it did something really quite important that's not well appreciated. It brought Republicans and Democrats together in a strong bipartisan consensus that said the U.S. has interests in Africa worth investing in. And that bipartisan consensus not only led to AGOA's passage in 2000, but AGOA's renewal in 2015, when it passed the U.S. Senate with a vote of 99-1. So we're at this juncture now where we're looking at 2025 when AGOA is set to expire, and there's a lot of interest to see AGOA modernized. As Florie said, it's been a very important piece of legislation. It's opened up a new era in U.S.-African relations. It's put trade and investment at the center of the U.S.-Africa policy dialogue. But there's more to do, there's more that can be done, and that's what we're grappling with now.
Thank you for sharing that. And Wilmot, could you tell us about VentureLift Africa and its involvement with AGOA?
Sure. So VentureLift is a venture studio with an advisory arm, as well as a platform for diaspora engagement that includes both investment and trade. And so we're fortunate and happy to be an implementation partner to USAID for the training of AGOA advisors across Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and across the US under Prosper Africa. So why is that important? One of the gaps in the utilization of AGOA has been a lack of knowledge, understanding how it works, its requirements, how it's benefiting US buyers, African suppliers. And so this is an initiative to close that information gap and knowledge gap so that dispersed across the continent, the region of Sub-Saharan Africa, and across the US, there will be trained individuals who have gone through training that is based upon a certificate assessment and approving, if you will, through going through a rigorous process with proven AGOA advisors over a 4-module period. And we believe that this is going to be really important in accelerating information about AGOA in terms of its dissemination, but also the utilization, because the more people who understand how it works and the more export-ready companies you have, and as importantly, the more buyers that are informed about how AGOA works and what to look for in the suppliers that have the products to ship over, that's going to make for greater trade facilitation under AGOA. Furthermore, there will be a linkage of those advisors to businesses so that they will have a pipeline of opportunities to implement that knowledge. And even beyond the scope of what we're currently doing,
looking to the next year or so, there's plan for an e-commerce digital trade platform, as well as the establishment of different platforms across the continent that are similar to trade hubs and across the US. So this is, to a large extent, Tony, democratizing access to AGOA trade policy, as well as tools such as trade finance, technical assistance for those who want to better utilize AGOA. And also, I think a key dimension as to what we're doing under AGOA with USAID is making sure that the diaspora have access to these resources and these opportunities. So we're very excited that USAID Prosper Africa has prioritized that, just as President Biden has done, in terms of diaspora engagement as a vehicle and a platform to strengthen U.S. and Africa economic relations.
Thank you. And next, I'd like to get an idea of some of the key AGOA trends since its inception and how they can be strengthened. I'd like to start with you, Florie, to get your insights on that.
In the early years of AGOA, I think that many of us who were involved were sort of waiting for the African products to sort of hit our market. We were so excited, and we were wondering, like, why are we not seeing this? And so the supply side constraints quickly became evident. And when I say supply side constraints, I meant the small businesses on the African side that were not accustomed to manufacturing, hadn't been meeting the US standards that needed to be met across the various products, and needed really trade capacity building support and technical assistance. And just to echo what Wilmot was saying, it was USAID in the early years of AGOA when we sat down with them and talked about what could be done. And that's when the regional trade hubs were first established to provide the capacity building support that Africans and African entrepreneurs in particular needed in order to take advantage of AGOA and to utilize it more effectively. And so the trends that we've seen since then, and I've always been excited about this whenever I travel to Africa. I always want to go to the factories in the different countries and see the products. And people will tell you, when I was in government, I had a big long table with all the products I would bring back and say, okay, this is coming into US under AGOA. This is coming from this country. This is coming from that country. And people be like, oh my gosh, we didn't know all these things were coming in from Africa. So I enjoy doing that. But the trend has been in increasing those value-added products to the US. It hasn't been easy. Some products have had more success getting into the US market than others. But again, I've been to factories in Africa producing not only apparel and textiles, everybody always talks about that, not only footwear, but eyeglasses, toys, value-added agricultural products, tomato sauces, green beans, ice cream, fruit juices, just a vast array. And of course, from South Africa, you even have automobiles, which come into the US duty-free under AGOA. So there has been an uptick in the products that are sent. It is a myth that only 4 or 5 African countries are benefiting from AGOA. There were 36 countries eligible for AGOA last year, and I believe 22 of them shipped products to the US under AGOA. So when people tell you that, oh, it's only benefiting a handful of countries and a handful of products, that's actually not accurate. What they probably are reflecting is the fact that the numbers are very small. But Tony, I just want to talk about that for a moment. On our end, if an African company is shipping to us, and I went to a factory in Swaziland, now Eswatini, and there were probably only about 60 people working there, mostly women. And they were producing jams and jellies that they were shipping to Whole Foods. They were only shipping 1 container a month, right? So that's not an awful lot, but for them, that was about as much as they could do. Now, I can attest myself to the peach ginger jam that they were sending. It was fabulous. If you go to Whole Foods, you could probably still find it. But when people are looking at the AGOA numbers, I use this example, that probably looks so tiny that they just dismiss it. But if you see it on the other end and you see the impact of it, those women had income, they could pay the school fees for their children. And all over the continent, when I would meet women, even in very small factories and facilities, they would tell you how much they're being able to produce those products under AGOA and ship it to the US meant to them personally. So I just advise people, don't let the numbers distract you from the impact.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. Whitney, do you have any input there?
Yeah, I think Florie's hit on a really important point. You look at intra-regional trade today in Africa, and it's only at 14%. But with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in implementation, it's set to rise to 30% in the next 5 years. And the same dynamic is going on with AGOA utilization. In 2015, when AGOA was renewed, the US Congress urged African countries who are AGOA eligibles to develop national utilization strategies. And about half of the 36 countries have actually done that. And those who have done that have seen a dramatic increase in their exports to the US under AGOA. For instance, Mozambique has seen an 800% increase in its AGOA exports. And these exports are made up of sugar and nuts and other products like tobacco. Again, small numbers for the US, but significant for the exporters from these countries. Togo has seen a 90% increase in fruit juices and vegetable products. So the work that Wilmot is doing, educating people about AGOA, informing people about AGOA, is as relevant today, if not more so, than when AGOA was passed. Because we can't underestimate how big the African continent is and how big the US market is. And where we see it, the US Africa, the way Africa sees it, they've got many partners they're working with. And so to have AGOA break through and be understood as an instrument of economic development that can be utilized easily, we've got a big task to do, a big education project. So I think the trend line is positive, but I think it can be even more positive in coming years. And that's why we're working hard to get renewed, hopefully for another 10 years.
Thank you. Wilmot, your thoughts?
Yes, I think 23 years is a long time. And so one of the things that I think is a trend is that over the years, you begin to see what are the supplemental resources and initiatives that need to emerge to facilitate greater AGOA trade. For example, I think that one of the things has been investment in infrastructure and in supply chains. I think the connection between trade and investment and the interplay between the two has been highlighted. I think the importance of highlighting and promoting the fact that AGOA supports inter-Africa trade in order to get more buy-in among African stakeholders is important. For example, Superringa is one of the companies that we support and help sell their product into the US. They use moringa, which is a superfood, which is both something that they source locally within South Africa, but also they import it from Zambia. And so jobs are created, supply chains strengthened as a result of that partnership between suppliers in Zambia, as well as the company Superringa in South Africa. And I think also there's now a greater sensibility around promoting the stories, impact stories, but also the personal stories of entrepreneurs, so that more buyers, more of the global audience in general will be more comfortable engaging with Africa. When we know how important branding and marketing is, we probably in the US are over commercialized in terms of the promotion and advertising certain brands throughout the continent. It's probably underserved. I think those are some of the things that we're trying to address. I think over the years is a trend with AGOA in terms of these deficiencies in some of the supplemental initiatives, supplemental resources that have to be mobilized. I think more stakeholders across the world, across Africa, across the US are interested now in making sure that there's progress being made.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to speak about some examples of businesses, US businesses that have benefited from AGOA trade with Africa. Florie, do you have some examples you can share?
So yes, there are a couple of examples that I love to talk about, but there's a Ghanaian American woman She has a company, Shea Yaleen, and in the shea industry. She works with women who are in cooperatives in Ghana who collect the shea and process it. And then it gets shipped here to the US and gets distributed in various stores, hotels, where you have those small packages of lotions and so forth. And I think the story there, in my view, is that's an excellent example of how a diaspora African here in the US, based in the US, working with women on the ground in Ghana can come together to take advantage of AGOA. It's a benefit to those women. And one of the things that I know the owner of Shailene is doing now is trying to get phones into the hands of all of these women. There are about 800 of them. She's trying to get phones into for sort of the first 100. And the purpose of that is so that they would actually be able to get their payment by using a mobile app on the phone rather than coming physically every day or every few days to get paid. And so that's also an example of the digital gender equality and empowerment. I don't know if, but during Vice President Harris's recent trip to Africa, she went to Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia, and she announced a program that's focused on digital gender equality in Africa. And this was one of the examples of women's economic empowerment using the digital platform. So that same entity, that same diaspora-owned business here working with Ghanaian women on the ground is also coming into the 21st century by now using a digital platform in order to be able to benefit those women and the business.
Thank you. Witney, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think a number of examples have been put forward here. I think it's important to look at Namibia and the beef that they export to the United States under AGOA. This is an example of a government that really understood that they had a resource that would work for the US market. They worked with US agricultural agencies to get all the regulatory clearances put in place. And I think they're the only African country that's exporting beef to the United States. It just really underscores that when an African government really drills down on what their value add is, they can really make a difference. I think there's another example that's worth mentioning, and that is the apparel company PVH, one of the largest apparel companies in the world. It's a US company. They actually relocated their production facilities from Asia to Ethiopia. And the Ethiopian government, again, made a major effort to attract them into the country. They developed an industrial park in Hawassa, south of Addis. And it was a real success story until the conflict broke out in Ethiopia and Ethiopia lost its benefits. And I think it raises it's for us today about, should we continue to have sort of our governance criteria linked to our trade policy in this respect? Make no mistake, this is not in any sense backing off of our commitment to democracy and accountability, but I think we have other instruments to use. And I think what we have seen in the African market is that we have to give our customers certainty. We have to give American companies certainty that these benefits will exist over time. And that leads to the kind of sustainable investment that creates jobs, takes advantage of AGOA. So I just mentioned that as one of the issues that I think we have to wrestle with as we contemplate the modernization of AGOA, and hopefully can get it done later this year.
Thanks, Witney. Thanks for making that point. And Wilmot, do you have any examples, best practices? And
Sure. Let me take this in a slightly different direction because I know some of your viewers might be thinking, what's in it for me? And to give some examples that's more practically for the U.S. buyer. And let me start by saying that there are a plethora of opportunities beyond just trade deals, direct trade deals, buying from Africa, ways in which you can get involved in supporting this work and benefit from it. For example, agriculture is a growth industry across Africa, It's a key component of the GDPs of most African countries. And for example, there's a company right near where you all are, Potomac, Maryland, D-Grid Energy. It's a minority-owned business that solar-powered cold storage and cooling services through storage units and soon bikes and trucks that are refrigerated as well. That company will directly benefit from current AGOA and extension of AGOA because it supports horticulture, agricultural commodities, and other products that are eligible under AGOA. That's a boom business. And then more stateside, Tony, on your show, maybe sometime last year, you had a woman who has a multi-million-dollar trucking company. And so she can easily benefit from this by getting plugged into some of the logistics and transportation networks, bringing in some of those supplies. I forget where she is located, but if you have a trucking business, if you're in the warehousing and logistics business, this is an opportunity for you to have maybe a bump in your business because of the increased inflows, hopefully, of AGOA products coming into the U.S. If you are a trade finance provider, most of the companies across Africa that are suppliers need to be able to meet their volume requirements, and so have to advance money in terms of manufacturing and producing those products in advance. And so that's another opportunity. And I think if you are also a company that's interested in being a distributor or a joint venture partner for cosmetics, we have a company also that has a beverage, this is Super Ringa again, that is now looking for an opportunity to partner with the company so that its product can be produced in the U.S. to save transportation costs and distributed throughout the country. So there are direct benefits and indirect business opportunities related to AGOA trade succeeding.
Thank you. And Wilmot, along those lines or similar lines, what are some best practices for implementing AGOA for businesses such as trade finance, logistics strategy, or identifying local partners in Africa?
Yeah, I think you've answered in part your own question. So I think it really is getting smarter locally, right? So if you are thinking you can easily identify companies, suppliers on your own through desk research, that's a hard task. So I think it's good to have intermediaries, and certainly we're one of them, that are already embedded in these local ecosystems. And it's also important to take advantage of some of the current resources offered by Prosper Africa and USAID in terms of knowledge, in terms of being able to have an opportunity to speak with some of their own advisors and the research and the market intelligence that they have on different suppliers who are already vetted. And so these are some of the things. Getting smarter locally is, I think, really important. But also, you got to be a little bit risk-taking in terms of at least being able to try a product. So there's so many buyers over the last few years who have been risk-averse in terms of trying products, in terms of being able to wanting to pay for samples. And so I think part of it is not only understanding the local ecosystems and being in direct relationship with suppliers, but getting smarter on the products and how they are produced, going the extra mile to get an understanding of how that product, based upon its packaging and everything else, can actually work in your local market. And the last thing I'll say is that one of the big things is having a really competent logistics advisor or someone or an entity, a company that can give you a workable strategy, because that is now one of the big impediments. It's the cost, right? Even though Africa, particularly the East Coast, they're relatively close, the shipping costs, the transportation costs, air costs, those costs can in many ways offset the savings that one would realize through duty-free trade. And so doing the due diligence, working with local partners to make sure you have a cost-efficient logistics strategy is really important.
Thank you. And lastly, Wilmot, what role can the diaspora play in promoting trade and investment with Africa?
The easy answer is by becoming buyers. The easy answer is by investing in supply chains and in manufacturing, value-added manufacturing, which is a growth sector and a big need. The easy answer is taking a trip to Africa and on a firsthand basis, getting to know the suppliers, the economies, how business works, how you get your money in and out of countries firsthand. Those are really important. I think we're starting to see this demonstration effect where diaspora are realizing that there are opportunities beyond remittances. And so when you think about once the diaspora get on board with becoming investors, with becoming trade partners, then I think in terms of the opportunity there, it's the push, meaning a lot of the push, the marketing in the US in terms of really what really builds brands is driven by urban communities and urban customers. And so we think that we'll continue to see that bump. We'll see it in fashion, right? We'll see it in health and beauty and in other products as well. So the diaspora have, I think, a really important part to play. And if you disaggregate the diaspora and its differentiation, I think it becomes more prominent, right? If you just take our profiles, Tony, you're second and third generation Nigerian American, you have firsthand knowledge. You can call relatively close person of kin and get local intelligence on this company, what to do about the situation. And so that's an added benefit of the collective diaspora when you understand that you have the contemporary diaspora, which is better connected, local knowledge, local relationships, access to capital that the historical diaspora may not be aware of, combining that intelligence with the marketing power and platform of the historical diaspora, the $2 trillion in buying power. So that's a very powerful combination. And when you look worldwide, comparatively, examples of tech transfer from India, examples of investment to build up an export economy from the Chinese diaspora, examples from Ireland and Israel, the diaspora engagement has made a tremendous difference.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today and sharing your expertise and your insights on this extremely important topic. I appreciate your time, and everyone have a great rest of the day and take care.
Great. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you.